Hi guys, it's Sophie. So today I wanted to do my December wrap up for you guys. It's a little bit late, I'm afraid, just because I've had a lot going on in terms of other videos to film right at the close of the year. I did, want to chat about the books that I read in the last month of 2016 with you guys. Now, it's fairly light on the fiction side, so I'm just going to run through those quickly for you. The first one is Roald Dahl's Deception, which is a collection of his adult short stories, all around the idea of sort of lies and people deceiving other people. I did enjoy this one. I think I gave it 4 stars. Didn't like it quite as much as Madness, but it did have that lovely sort of element of Roald Dahl stuff where you know something horrid's going to happen and you just don't know quite what it is yet, and I did really enjoy that. I found that really entertaining. If you enjoy his adult stories, you're probably going to really like this collection. I just think Madness is a bit better. And the next one I have is The Sonic Pilgrims by Jenni Fagan, which I actually buddy read by Amy from Shout Amy, and I had sort of mixed feelings about this one. It's a very wintry tale. It's essentially about a group of individuals who are living up in Scotland close to the end of the world, which is sort of set into motion by sort of global warming, which leads to a new ice age. Sort of crossing the world as the ice caps melt and the salination of the ocean is lowered, and it kicks off this sort of overall freezing. And the interesting parts of this story were really the family dynamics. It was really the interactions between this mother who was someone who has sort of multiple relationships, quite open relationships, and her daughter Stella, who was transsexual and was sort of going through a transition as well as all of this happening, and they're interrelations with this man who has come up from London to scatter his mother and his grandmother's ashes, sort of the last time he can when he's in Scotland. And certainly those bits of the story are far more interesting to me than any of the rest, which I actually thought was a little bit of a weakness because, to be honest, I didn't care so much about what was happening around them. I'm glad I read it because it's one of the ones that I've been sort of thinking about reading for a while, but I didn't love it as much as I thought I was going to. There are some really strong reasons to read this book, and I think the characters are the reasons to do that. If you really like character-driven stuff and aren't so worried about storyline, then this is probably the kind of thing you're really going to enjoy. If you need a little bit more from it story-wise than that, then it may be that you find things lacking, as I did, but by all means, it's one you'll probably figure out by that whether you'll enjoy it or not. And the next one is another collection of short stories, and this is Multitudes by Lucy Caldwell, and this is a collection of sort of realist stories which are all sort of round about Belfast, about sort of growing up, really, and I like stuff like this. This is the kind of writing that I try and seek out when I'm reading my novel, stuff that feels really real and almost unapologetically real, as though it would be a challenge for you to find the things in this that make it a story and not reality. I know that sounds a bit odd, but the kind of things where if there's a direct link to those characters. I think they were all really well written. I didn't like the first story as much as I like the others though, which is a bit of a shame, but they all did feel that kind of element of reality. I don't know whether she has written novels, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's something I might go out and try and seek from her, just because the kind of things I enjoyed were there, but I wanted to see it in a bit of a longer form, I think. I think I felt a little bit unsatisfied by feeling like I got to know the characters and then immediately withdrawing. So I think I'd look out for her novels, and it's a strong start. It's not my favourite short story collection that I've ever read, though I know lots of people really do enjoy it, but there's a lot to be celebrated in this one. The next two aren't so positive, I'm afraid. The Buried Giant by Kazuo Ishiguro was one of the worst books that I read in the whole of 2016. I've been promised by my stepdad that it would get better by the end, and I think it just got worse and worse and worse. I really wouldn't recommend this. I think it's boring, I think it's bloated, I didn't enjoy the setting, I didn't enjoy the language. I found the entire thing just so dull. It put me in a massive reading slump for the month and very nearly made me miss out on my Goodreads reading goals. I have some bad feelings about this. It's one of those ones where people have been sort of meh about it anyway, and I just really don't think it's worth your time. Sorry guys. And the next one I was a bit disappointed with as well, and that is Here I Am by Jonathan Safran Foer. This is a book that sounded super interesting to me at face. It follows a Jewish family and sort of a troubled marriage, mixed in with this sort of comparison to this earthquake that occurs in the Middle East and how it acts as sort of like a tinder spark for the sort of pressurised environment they've been building up. And essentially there are holy sites that are destroyed, there are people who are trying to take them over and sort of safeguard them for their own purposes, and other people who see it as an opportunity to gain land and gain territory. And it's all sort of linking this one Jewish family's experience of Judaism to this like quagmire of political sort of background. I thought the novel was too ambitious, to be honest, and I didn't feel as though the links between those two sections were strong enough to merit the book. I would have been interested, I think, in either one of those two stories, but together it just felt a little bit too grand, a little bit too ambitious, and I don't think that he fully pulled it off. Valid effort, I think, and an interesting sort of concept. But I felt as though I was reaching the whole time to make these comparisons. I felt as though it was almost parable-esque, that you're being forced to see meaning as opposed to it being sort of there in the storyline, and I think that frustrated me. I will carry on with reading Jonathan Safran Foer, sort of in time, reading his other stuff, but I just didn't really get on with this one at all. It wasn't sort of like a 2-star book. I think I gave it 3 stars, but it just felt a little too large, I think. And I think the topics felt simplified rather than sort of illuminated, which is what I prefer to see if you're going to try and use small examples for large issues. But there you go, there's some thoughts on that one. Now we'll kick off next with a little bit of non-fiction. I finally got round to Reasons to Stay Alive by Matt Haig, and unfortunately I didn't really like this one either. I'm probably going to be in the vast minority of people who don't like this book, and I think if you are suffering from mental health issues, you may find this helpful. I want to say that before I say anything else, because I know it's well loved by a lot of people. For me, reading about this kind of thing as someone who is in the sort of recovery stage, so at a time when I'm pretty much better from everything that is going on in my life, I think of a few things that will trip me up and I'll suddenly go a little bit mad, but most of the time I'm fairly well. I find it really hard to read stuff like this, and I find it puts me in a bad headspace, but I don't think the book is negative. I don't think it's designed to do that. It puts me in a state of feeling sorry for myself, and it puts me in a state of looking backwards, and I'm trying really hard not to do that anymore. Not that I don't think past stuff is important, not that I don't think it's valid, but I don't think it should be all-encompassing. So, I think this could be useful for a lot of people, but if you're someone like me who's kind of trying to get past that point in your life, sometimes reading stuff like this can be dwelling. If you're currently going through some stuff, I'm sure it's much more helpful. But there you go. Unfortunately, I didn't love this one. I read it fairly quickly, but who I am in this book couldn't get along. And the next one is a non-fiction. It was the last one I read within the year, and that is The Ministry of Guidance Invites You Not to Stay by Human Majid. And this was absolutely fascinating as a book. The subtitle is An American Family in Iran. And basically this book is about a man who was born in Iran, and he moved to the United States when he was a few years old, and became a journalist writing about Iran, writing about the sort of interrelation between Iranian and American politics, who, when he has his own son, is concerned that his son will never know what Iran was like and never understand his father's connection to Iran. His mother's American, and he'll have lived in America his whole life, and the author decides that he wants to give his son the chance to see Iran at least once, while it's still a relatively sort of peaceful environment that he can take him to and can safely get him out of. So they make this trip with a very young toddler and settle in Tehran for a year. And it's absolutely fascinating because you have these two sides. You have this person who's been displaced from Iran and sort of identifies as sort of Iranian American, and his wife, who is fully Western and has never been to or visited a country even vaguely like Iran before. And you have these sort of two perspectives of the culture, and especially I feel like I learnt a lot about the way that sort of Iranian society feels about the Western world, especially around American and British sort of people in the country, and it was just a really lovely sort of eye-opening picture of Iran as a place, and also the ways in which different cultures are perceived sort of across the world. It was really good fun, a really different kind of thing to anything I've ever read before, and the first book about Iran I think I've ever read. I've read a couple others that have been written by people in Iran, thinking back about it, but the one that's focused on the country the most, I think. And yeah, it's really interesting if you are sort of dipping your toes in and want to do a little bit of sort of own voices or alternate voices. This is a good place, I think. And then I have a couple ones that are little TED Talks. Both these two, so I have The Laws of Medicine by Siddhartha and Murkerjee and How We'll Live on Mars by Stephen Petranek. Very different kind of books. Both of them I enjoyed. They're the kind of thing I'd say you want to have in your purse for like a doctor's office or like a train trip kind of thing. They're interesting. They're basically TED Talks but just in written form. They're really gorgeous books. Like I just absolutely love the way they're put together. I don't know if you can see that, but they have these sort of like tetraform shapes on them almost, which are sort of highlighted in different colours. It's really beautiful. I much preferred Siddhartha Mukherjee's, but I really enjoy his writing. The Mars one is quite anti government space agencies, and I'm quite pro government space agencies, so we had some sort of differing opinions there. But if you do find yourself around these TED Talks, I do think they're worth a go, and if you enjoy TED Talks anyway, they're kind of nice things to have, because TED Talks are the kind of thing where like you watch them but you don't necessarily revisit them, so I think these are good fun. And the last one I have is just jumping on the bandwagon. I have a little book of Highgate Hunger or whatever, by Meik Wiking. This is a really beautifully produced little book. They have sort of like really nice drawings throughout, and little like pictures and recipes and all sorts. It's just a book that's going to make you feel cosy and warm for a little bit, and I just wanted to see sort of why they're all being so published so much. They're just nice books to have, I think. It didn't change my life, it didn't teach me anything, to be perfectly honest. It was just sort of a comfy book because it reaffirms sort of all the things I do in my life. Right now I live in a way that's very similar to this sort of feelings of that sort of mixture of like outdoors and freshness, and then like coziness and warmth, like that kind of contrast between the two, and sort of the sense of sensory things being important. So yeah, it was nice, but yeah, it's not the kind of thing I would say is going to change anyone's world. It's very much like a fads thing that people are going through at the minute, but bookish people tend to like the kind of things that are in here, and it's a nicely produced book if you are looking for one. A couple poetry things to run through. So the first one is a tiny little book called The King of Christmas by Caroline Duffy, which is just one little poem, which has all these little, so far away, but all these little drawings throughout. You can kind of see, and just really tiny little bits of poetry running through. I thought it was nice, I thought it was sweet, it's very Christmassy, it's very seasonal. Again, it's not sort of a world-changing kind of thing, it's just nice to have, and I kind of used it more as a decoration than anything else, but yeah, it was sweet. The next one I read was Undying, a love story by Michel Faber. This one I'd seen talked about a fair bit, and I really expected it to upset me a lot more than it did. They're very touching poems, but I don't think I immediately engaged with the style, which took some of the emotion away from me. This is a collection of poetry written about Michel Faber and about his relationship with his wife, who died of cancer, and the poems are around that whole sort of experience, and the experience of being someone who's been with someone who's died, who's had a serious illness. And whilst I haven't read anything quite like this before, I've read other sort of things around people losing people, and I think I'm quite picky around my poetry and about what resonates with me, and something about the style made it feel a little distant. So the emotion was there, but it's more sort of concealed just because of the fact that I don't think I got on with the style. It is very good, and it is touching, and I think poetry is something that you kind of you click with things, or you don't. So if you sort of fancy picking up and having a go, then I think it's a gorgeous book on itself, and it is really sad, but I just personally didn't get on with the style as much. And the next one was a reread for me, just because I just really fancied it and I love her poetry so much, but it's Pole Dancing to Gospel Hymns by Andrea Gibson. I reread Andrea Gibson most years, but I sat down and just read the whole thing aloud in one go in the afternoon, and it's beautiful. She's beautiful, her poetry is amazing. If you haven't ever watched any of her videos, please do. Say Yes is one of my favourites. I'll link that one in the comments. I'll link that one in the box down below for you, so that you can have a check her stuff out if you haven't ever done so before. And then lastly, we're getting there, I promise, I have a couple graphic slash sort of picture books to show you. The first one is Pax by Sara Pennypacker, and this is a children's book about a young boy and his fox. It's very touching. It was sort of, you know, one of those things where like there's a lot of messages going on behind here. So the this book focuses quite a lot on like war and on the personal effects of war and the effects of war on children and people who've come back, and there certainly was a message in here. Now, I really like the book. I think it's gorgeous, I think it's beautifully published, I think the story's really good, but sometimes I do struggle where I see such a strong message, because I'm an adult, obviously I can see it so easily, but such a strong message in children's books, and I don't know quite how I feel about that, because there's an element of me, whilst, you know, I don't think this is a particularly bad idea, like let's be nice to one another and not hurt one another, but there's something a little bit odd about telling children who are very young stories which have a really strong political message in them. That's just my sort of feeling around that. I do think it's gorgeous. I do think it's beautiful, and as an adult, it's a story I can appreciate and critically evaluate. My issue is whether or not people who would be old enough to read this would be able to do that for themselves. Next to graphic novels, the first one is Rinse, Spin, Repeat by Edith Fassnidge, and this is a graphic memoir around a woman who was caught in the 2004 tsunami, about her losing her mother and her sister, and about her and her partner and how they sort of survive and live after this event. I think that the graphic style is very, very sort of plain, almost quite childlike, which I actually quite enjoyed. And I think it's sad, it's touching, but I also think I know a lot about this subject. I think this was a fairly easy read for me, not because the subject matter is not sort of sad, but because I've watched a fair few documentaries around this, and my mum watched a fair amount about this when it had happened, but I didn't find it shocking just because I'd had a few exposures to it already. But if you are looking for something that explores it in a fairly accessible way, as I've said as well, the drawings are very simple and you know, very easy to read, very quick read as well, then this might be something you're interested in. As I say, I've seen it a few times before, so it wasn't unfamiliar ground to me. And the last one was a graphic novel that I absolutely loved, and it was 100 Nights of Hero by Isabel Greenberg. Now, this is the same person who did the Encyclopedia of Early Earth, which I haven't read, but I'll just try and show you like the style that we're in here. It's beautiful, it's absolutely beautiful. The stories were so funny. I wasn't expecting it to be funny, but it was really funny, really sweet. It's essentially a story, it's kind of like 101 Nights, like the Arabian Nights story tale, but with two women who have fallen in love with one another and are trying to escape the advances of this man who's testing the virtue of one of these two women. Who has married a husband so that she doesn't have to sort of actually sleep with him. She's saying, I'm so pure and chaste that I can't sleep with anyone, but really she's in love with this woman and with this woman. It was just really lovely. Like, it was, I read it in an evening in a few hours, and it's just one of those things, it's just a really nice evening to spend. Beautiful stories, very sort of feminist, very focused around female strength and the powers of women when they sort of come together, and yeah, it was just really sweet, really lovely. And I haven't read the Encyclopedia of Early Earth, but I would really like to, especially having seen how much I enjoyed this one. So there you go, that's everything that I read in the month of December, and that will be my last sort of one for 2016. We'll jump into January next. So yeah, it was a lot of short books. It was a lot of books that are like cheaty because I wanted to reach that 200, and it was just a case of like fitting in what I could. And again, like we're going to speak about this sort of throughout the next few weeks really, but I knew I was doing it, and it proves to me how little that 200 actually meant in reality, in that I would just adjust what I was doing to meet my goals. It wasn't a real challenge for myself. So you know, that's a whole other thing that we chatted about a little bit. But yeah, so that's why there are some sort of shorter ones and graphic novels and sort of short chapbooky kind of things in there as well. So I hope that you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you soon in my next one. Bye guys.